Good evening, I'm Carrie Pena.
And I'm political editor Dennis Welch. This is Politics Unplugged.
District 1, not only the biggest congressional district in Arizona, it is also the 10th largest in the country, home to more Native Americans than any other in the United States. But Representative Ann Kirkpatrick is considered one of the more vulnerable Democrats, as 3 Republicans are hoping to secure the GOP nomination in the upcoming primary.
And 2 of the 3 GOP candidates joining us tonight, House Speaker Andy Tobin and House State Representative Adam Kwasman. Gary Keeney did not join us, despite our best efforts to get him to come on.
Gentlemen, glad to have both of you. So let's start with you, Mr. Tobin. Why are you the man for the job?
Well, let's face it. I think that as we're watching the world's greatest generation leave us, what we are seeing is that our nation is also changing. And I believe that the next world's greatest generation are our children that are here today. And I have 5 children. I live in rural Arizona. I wanted to find a way that I can say 10 years from now that I wasn't sitting on the couch when our country was falling apart. So I decided to get back in this game like I did when I was here, served as Speaker, and for 8 years in the legislature, to make a difference. And we made a difference there. One person can do that, and I believe one person in Washington can do that as well.
Mr. Kwasman?
I believe that when government is limited, we can go as far as our God-given talents can take us. And Barack Obama and Ann Kirkpatrick are destroying this country. If we don't send solutions-based conservatives to Washington, D.C. right now, those who will fight for constitutional liberty, free market solutions to our nation's problems, we're going to go over that fiscal cliff. $100 trillion in debt. If we don't stop that now, we won't have a future for our children and future generations.
How are you guys different? What separates the 2 of you?
I think we're very different. Well, first and foremost, I live in the district. I think that's very important that you run in a district that you represent. But also, Andy and I have very different records in the legislature. While Andy has been there for longer than I have, his record tends to be more of the bigger government, more establishment record. For example, I made a name for myself for fighting against our own party when they tried to pass the Medicaid expansion through Obamacare in the last session. Andy, on the other hand, wrote his own Obamacare bill to expand Medicaid, ended up voting against the governor's plan, but I don't believe that that was the right way to go forward. We need to send fighters to Washington, D.C. who will stand up against big government Republicans and big government Democrats.
Mr. Tobin?
Well, I mean, the answer is that Adam hasn't fought for anything yet. I mean, you guys have been out of the state capitol. We've passed 1070. I voted for it. Adam was nowhere to be found.
I wasn't in the legislature yet.
Well, I had many citizens come to us and say, hey, we need your help. Look at what's going on at the border. So we had E-Verify we had down there. We cut taxes. Right now we have Forbes magazine saying that this state, who wasn't sure we even had payroll 6 years ago, now we're the #1 state moving forward with job growth over the next 10 years. That's from Forbes magazine. The best pro-life record in Arizona history, one of the best states in the country to defend Second Amendment rights. So our constitutional rights have been a top priority for us. We've cut government by 1/4. Mr. Kwasman hasn't cut a nickel out of government yet. So as you move forward, and you're talking about what are conservative solutions and who's fighting, Mr. Kwasman wants to talk about who's fighting. I've already been in a big fight.
The 2 of you have battled about who's the more conservative. The fact of the matter is this district is huge. There's a variety of people in there, but you need to appeal to independents and conservative Democrats. How do you do that?
Well, I think it's very important, and that's why the record that I have in the legislature, I think, lends itself far more to this district. For example, Common Core is a huge issue for parents with children in schools that don't want to see big government being rammed through their school systems. I voted against Common Core. It was HB 2047 in the first session of the last legislature. Andy Tobin voted for Common Core park testing installation. You know, these are differences where I could go then to the homeschool parents and as well as to charter school parents. Those don't know a party, but we know that big government is not going to be slammed down their throats. When we talk about the fight against Obamacare, we need to make sure that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, well, we will compromise a little bit. We need to make sure that we stand up firmly against Obamacare, that we don't write our own plans. We have to make sure that we repeal Obamacare entirely and replace it with common sense solutions. I think the people right now are sick of doublespeak. They're sick of big government Republicans. They want to be represented by conservatives. Conservatism doesn't know a party. Conservatism is a set of principles. Free markets are the solution.
And Mr. Tobin, how do you appeal to these conservative Democrats if you're lucky enough to win the primary?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, you know, what we need is workforce development in the rural communities. What we're talking about is JTEDs. We're talking about community colleges. We're talking about our investment in our education, small businesses who are struggling in rural Arizona far and beyond what's going on here in the urban areas. Not to mention those other issues that are crippling to us. Obamacare is crushing us. Mr. Kwasman wasn't here for the Healthcare Freedom Act either that I helped sponsor. Mr. Kwasman wasn't here when we were suing the federal government over this. So clearly I'm not a Common Core person. Mr. President Big? No, I wasn't. We voted to get rid of Ames, Mr. Kwasman. It's the vote to get rid of Ames. The entire Republican Senate voted for this bill. So I know this is important that he find a place, but trying to suggest that the leader, the Speaker of the House of arguably the most conservative legislature in the country, who is elected 4 times to leadership, is anything but a conservative, is really absurd.
So, Mr. Tobin, I have 2047 right here.
Yeah.
This bill put in park testing. I voted no, you voted yes on this bill. This bill never made it to the Senate vote. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Mr. Kwasman, you're reading a summary. You didn't even read the bill. Mr. Kwasman, it never put in park. It took out Ames, just like the entire Senate Republican caucus, the President of the Senate, Senator Melvin, all those. We had to get rid of Ames, Mr. Kwasman.
This bill never made it to the Senate. Andy, you voted for HB 2047. This is park testing.
All right, we're going to get to Common Core here in just a minute. I want to move on to another big issue that's over really all of Arizona, and particularly it's going to be big in CD1, and that is Medicaid expansion. You say that you want to put stricter regulations on the governor's plan to expanded Medicaid to cover more and more of the state's neediest people. You want to, and Mr. Kwasman, you want to get rid of it altogether.
Correct.
Now, I want to start with you. Why do you want to take away these types of services from these people who are now depending upon it?
Because I don't believe that a big government spiderweb is the way forward. I believe that the best social program that we can have is a job. Medicaid expansion will bankrupt the state of Arizona.
There are plenty of people with jobs right now that don't have medical coverage.
We need to make sure that whatever we reform Obamacare with, when we repeal Obamacare and replace it with free market solutions such as tax-free health savings accounts, the ability to purchase health insurance across state lines, risk pools that allow small businesses to join together to lower the cost of care, those are conservative solutions. Andy wrote his own Obamacare plan. He wrote his own bill to expand Obamacare in Arizona. It taxed the hospitals more than the governor's plan. It was a big government plan. And he said on a debate just Monday that he did not write his own plan to expand Medicaid in Arizona. Here's the Verity Independent that says Andy Tobin wrote his own plan to expand Medicaid in Arizona. We're sick of this double talk.
It's okay. You know, the immaturity and ignorance of what the Speaker's function is, Adam, Mr.
That's
Kwasman.
Insulting. I apologize. That's insulting.
Well, it's not the first time you called me a liar. So, Mr. Kwasman, I would share with you that a Speaker's task, the Speaker's job is when you see this ball coming down the hill and it's bad and it's something you don't support, you don't leave your members hung out there. You don't leave your business community hung out there. You don't leave rural hospitals in Arizona hung out there with a bad bill. I was trying to find ways and alternatives for my members, the members of my caucus, to feel like, okay, we can get something fixed out of this process that's coming. I sued the governor. We just spoke. The governor and I spoke yesterday. She's still a little bit disgruntled with me that I'm in a lawsuit with her over Prop 108. So I get it. You're desperate for a victory here. I get it. You were in the legislature
I'm sorry. I'm not going to let that stand.
Well, you were in the legislature 6 months before you decided you're running for Congress. And you're the conservative.
I'm sorry. We don't have any more time for this type of Washington doublespeak. This is the same thing that we see out of leadership. This is the same thing we see out of leadership in Washington, D.C. when people hem and haw, when supposed Republicans are trying to throw our values out the window instead of standing on principle. We need real conservatives in Washington, D.C. to solve the problems for all of the United States of America.
You're saying he's not a real conservative?
I am saying he's not a real conservative, and not only me. When you have Americans for Prosperity in 2009, 2010 named him friend of big government for a reason. Because of his votes, he pushed through $1 billion sales tax increase. He did. He was the majority whip. He pushed it through. And his votes later on, when he wrote his own Medicaid expansion bill, when he voted for Common Core. These are principles that conservatives are standing up and saying, no, we're seeing what's happening in Washington.
I'll let you respond right after the break. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, immigration reform back in the spotlight after migrant children are bused into Arizona. But first, what lies ahead for our children and Common Core? We've talked a little bit about that. We'll talk some more on the other side of the break. We want to welcome you back to Politics Unplugged. Joining us tonight, two of the three Republicans running for Congress, House Speaker Andy Tobin, Representative Adam Kwasman. We do want to say Gary Keeney was unable to make it. Of course, we did invite him as well. All right, before the break, Mr. Kwasman made some pretty stern accusations against you not being a conservative. I want to let you respond.
Well, you know, I can't keep up with Mr. Kwasman's comedy. The answer is that this conservative legislature, who, bar very few legislatures in the entire nation, have done what we've done for states' rights. Most people, especially in the media, will agree. You were down there covering us for these 6 years with Governor Brewer. And I've been elected not once, not twice, not three, 4 times by this caucus for Majority Whip, Majority Leader, and twice as Speaker of the House. I share with you that I recognize that, you know, over 7.5, 8 years, I'm sure that maybe we can have a disagreement over something I was trying to do and somewhere else to leverage a bill. I get it. I know Mr. Kwasman doesn't understand all that. But I would tell you that this caucus just does not elect liberals. They do not. They elect people who are fiscal and, in principle, conservatives. And clearly, that has been the mantra for 7.5 years that I've been at it. Many of my endorsers say the same. The scorecard that you can't eat in our district is many of those people who contribute to the Americans for Prosperity are big supporters of mine and have helped fund my campaign, and I thank them very much. It's not always what it appears. And Mr. Kwasman, I get it. He's trying to make sure that I look like somebody who I'm not. I understand that that's part of politics. But at the end of the day, I have an incredible record that I don't believe there's a speaker in the country who could share what I have done. And I think that Mr. Kwasman knows that.
Now, I want to move back to that issue we talked about earlier, education, Common Core in particular. It's very obvious. We know where you stand from what you said earlier. You are against Common Core. Arizona business community has made it their top priority to keep Common Core this year. It's a set of standards that was adopted by the federal government. It came from the states. It's a way to measure performance with children across the country. What's wrong with adopting standards to see how children are performing and how other states are educating their kids compared to others?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that your children are common. I believe that standards are important. However, when you have a big government agency that's driving down the quality of education while increasing the costs through the, let's call it what it is, it's essentially a drug pusher that is Washington, D.C. with funds, the way the funding mechanism works to the states. This is the government takeover of education. And it's affecting not only public schools, but private schools, charter schools, and home schools. I apologize. I'm not going to let that go. The arrogance that's coming from my competitor from across the table, saying that Adam doesn't understand. No. Conservatives from across the country understand that Common Core is destroying us. We're just sick of double talk. We understand that there are bad situations when you have a governor of the same party who wants to force Obamacare down our throats, but we stand up against that. We don't compromise on certain principles. That is not standing up for conservatism is not something that's done childishly or immaturely.
Let's stick to Common Core.
So let's stick to Common Core. Andy Tobin voted for park testing. That's 2047. Yeah. I voted against it. The conservatives in the House voted against it.
Mr. Tobin, go ahead.
Listen, here's the problem with Common Core. They have completely missed the mark. Superintendent Huppenthal and I have had this argument as recently as a few weeks ago at an event. I have school districts that are not able to to even train their teachers to be able to even implement this. My suggestion had been for a long time that we use a standard 10s for the time being for our grade schools, and we use SATs for our high schools. It seems to me that they're already testing that's available, and we should go back to the process of inviting the public in, parents, teachers, school administrators, and redraft this. No one in the country can say that the #1 state in America for school choice is in Arizona.
So you don't agree with Common Core?
No, I've not agreed with that. But I do agree that Ames had to die. It was ridiculously reduced to nothing, and that's what we were trying to accomplish.
I want to move on to another really important issue in this district. It doesn't get a lot of mainstream media attention, but it is a crucial issue. There are 4 coal plants located in District 1, and recently the EPA proposed to cut carbon dioxide emissions in half. So the question here is, and Mr. Tobin, I'll start with you, how do you abide by that and still preserve jobs? Because there are a lot of jobs on the line in that district.
There are a lot, and they're Native American jobs in many of those districts. If the Obama administration continues down this pathway, they will literally help shut down a percentage of Arizona's economy that we will not be able to recover from. You cannot take a community like Page and think, maybe, Kerry, you might be interested in investing in a car dealership up there. Why would you do that if you're thinking, oh my gosh, they may shut down another tower? What would happen to Winslow? What would happen to St. John's? You know, they have absolutely no comprehension of how this affects rural Arizona. So just Monday we had Representative Frank Pratt, at my direction, had put together a hearing. So we started having some public comment about this. You know, the federal government, these people are out of control, who are the bureaucrats who are running in the EPA. And Congress gave them those authorities. The Supreme Court says they can do whatever they want. We're getting what we expected. We should have been able to shut that down long ago and take those controls out of the bureaucrats' hands. Now, until we get rid of this president, I am deeply concerned that we're not going to have another opportunity.
Now, Mr. Kwasman, it's your chance to respond to that.
Well, I think this is where you'll see total agreement between Gary Keeney, Andy, and myself, and that we support pieces of legislation like the RAINS Act that conservative champions like David Schweikert and Matt Salmon have been pushing for. That is getting the control back to where it belongs. That is the Congress. That is the people's house, and out of the hands of out-of-control bureaucracies. And Kirkpatrick and Barack Obama, their view screen is, for radical environmentalist policy, they want to shut down jobs in Arizona, and they want to raise the costs of water and agriculture in the state of Arizona, and that will hurt the poorest among us. So you will not see any point of disagreement.
In fairness, I don't think that they would say that they're aiming to shut down jobs. I think they're aiming to say that they're protecting the public health. Just playing devil's advocate. You know what? We're going to pick this up when we come back. I know you have a lot more to say, and a lot more still ahead on Politics Unplugged. We're getting the candidates' take on everything from the treatment of our veterans, plus this.
My heart goes out to them. I mean, I don't know, it's sad.
Heartbreak coupled with outrage following the recent surge of migrant children being dropped off in Arizona. Politics Unplugged continues right after this. We want to welcome you back to Politics Unplugged and a very spirited conversation with the Republican candidate seeking to represent District 1. With us tonight, House Speaker Andy Tobin and State Representative Adam Kwasman.
In immigration reform, Arizona is dealing with hundreds of unaccompanied minors being taken into custody while illegally crossing the border in Texas, putting immigration reform back in the spotlight. And I want to ask you two gentlemen, if you were in the Congress right now, would you vote for the proposed immigration reform deal that's been passed by the Senate and it's been in the House? No.
There should be no pathway to citizenship. If the Democrats wanted immigration reform, they could have had everything they wanted when they did Obamacare. They absolutely have a different political agenda. This president's political agenda is to create more crisis. At a time when we're watching these trains coming in from Honduras and Central America because these children are being abused, to have them show up in Texas and then moved around, I think is almost planned. They could have very easily spent, you want to spend some money? Let's help those governments. Let's put some housing down there and keep some security down there for them so they get to stay there and secure our border. The governor's been screaming for this for years, so have I. This president has been so negligent in getting that point done. It has created this problem when people think they can just come into this country and now they get taken care of on our taxpayer dollars when our children can't get jobs.
So you don't support the current deal?
I do not support the current deal.
But speaking of children, very quickly, what would you support a pathway to citizenship for the so-called dreamers?
Not at this time.
The immigrants that were brought here as young children, no fault of their own.
Now I will share with you what I have said. This is a great country, great humanitarians. I don't want to send children who have grown up in this country back to lands they've never been before, and I don't want to break up families. But you can't take advantage of the United States citizens by burying them in a continuous debt that we cannot get ourselves out of. And that's going to hurt all of us. It's going to hurt our kids, our citizens, and everybody.
That sounds, see, what Andy just said is that he doesn't want to make sure that those who are citizens of another country go back to a country of origin. See, that's the difference. Andy's also come out for legal status for those who are here illegally. This is one of the glaring, besides the big economic differences between the two of us, one of the big glaring differences is on immigration. I am the only one.
12 million people back home? I'm talking about a child who was brought here at 1 year old, like my son's friend, Manny, who was brought here, raised, doesn't even know Spanish, had a DUI, I believe, ended up getting deported. Fine, he broke the law. How do you send those 12 million back who have been here? I guarantee that this nation has to find a way to solve its issues.
It's not through amnesty, though, Andy.
There is no amnesty. You heard me say there is no citizenship. You can call it what you want. The answer is that these people are coming across the border because we are not securing that border, and we are not closing it down.
Give me a quick chance to respond, then we got to move on.
This is the big problem again in Washington, D.C. with the establishment. The establishment wants to call it something else. It is amnesty. When you are not enforcing the rule of law, it's amnesty. Excuse me.
12 million.
I've been endorsed by Sheriff Joe Arpaio for a reason, and that is because I strong firmly against amnesty, and I'm the only one in this CD1 race who actually has 100% anti-amnesty belief.
All right, I want to move on. I want to move on, and now let's talk.
I've got 5 sheriffs that have endorsed me too. This is you give 1, I'll give 5. But I mean, the answer is that Paul Babu, I mean, Sheehan, all these sheriffs, they know where my record has been.
Let's talk about the VA scandal now. Another really important subject that we've been covering, Dennis especially, very extensively. Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, the highest-ranking Democrat on the subcommittee for investigations and oversight on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So how did it get to this point? What do you think needs to happen now?
Well, it got to this point because you have too much government involved in this process and not enough people paying attention to our veterans. And as I don't know, I've been to both of these veteran hospitals in Phoenix and in Prescott, of course, and we've put in this legislature, including Mr. Kwasman, we voted for nursing homes for veterans. We built one before Mr. Kwasman got down in Tucson. Arizona's commitment to our veterans is very real and very secure, and especially my own. But I would share with you that Ann Kirkpatrick has so missed the target on this. Now, I got a notice and I sent an email out. That is not enough. For heaven's sake, if you're going to tout that you're a big veteran supporter, you'd better not vote to stop their COLAs. I mean, and she did. You better not vote to close down veterans' memorials so that our veterans can't get in to see them.
We have 1 minute left, Mr. Kwasman.
It was unconscionable what Ann Kirkpatrick did, just by passing the buck up the line instead of going public. We need transparent, accountable leaders in Washington, D.C. Again, you're not going to see a disagreement between Andy, Gary, or myself when it comes to taking care of our veterans. The Republican Party will make sure that that veterans are taken care of through choice, healthcare choice, so they can go to any hospital that they see fit.
Well, the failure to the veterans, to be clear, though, this is not just pinned on Democrats. I think they were failed across the board.
I get it, but if that was a Republican president up there, would you be saying that? You have a Democrat president who has so failed this nation, and this week alone, I can't even count the number of scandals. We have Sergeant Tamariz still in a jail. He has cut a deal.
Which is absurd.
Releasing terrorists.
He's releasing terrorists. We got the Middle East is in turmoil. The VA's nuts. I'm down in Nogales and finding that they won't even let me see these children to make sure that they're okay. And that order came from Washington.
We're going to have to leave it right there. We'll leave it here on a note of agreement between the two of you.
A rare note of agreement.
I want to thank you both so much. Really appreciate you here. Like having these extensive conversations. And thanks to all of you for watching Politics Unplugged. We look forward to seeing you back here with us next week.